Good Monday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for February the 27th. We are reading together today in Exodus chapter 16 and also Exodus chapter 17, which will wrap up this little section pertaining to three instances where Israel seems to have very quickly forgotten all the amazing and incredible things that God has done for them. They complain on three occasions, once about water, secondly about food, and the third time about water once again. And yet what we see is something very interesting in the fact that God does not just go off on them. He does not chastise them very strongly. Instead, he shows great patience and long suffering towards them in that he provides for their needs very quickly and shows them that there is no reason for them not to trust him. So let's look at that together today. Again, we are looking at Exodus 16 and 17. 16 and verse number 17, the entire Israelites community, and I got stuff going on here. Hold on one second. Sorry about that. Let's see here. There we go. All right. Exodus 16 and verse number 1. The entire Israelite community departed from Elim and came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had left the land of Egypt. The entire Israelite community grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by pots of meat and ate all the bread we wanted. Instead, he brought us into this wilderness to make this whole assembly die of hunger." Then Yahweh said to Moses, "I am going to rain bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. This way I will test them to see whether or not they will follow my instructions. On the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather on the other days." So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, "This evening you will know that it was Yahweh who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you will see Yahweh's glory, because he has heard your complaints about him. For who are we that you complain about us?" Moses continued, "Yahweh will give you meat to eat this evening and all the bread you want in the morning, for he has heard the complaints that you are raising against him. Who are we? Your complaints are not against us, but against Yahweh." Then Moses told Aaron, "Say to the entire Israelite community, 'Come before Yahweh, for he has heard your complaints.'" And as Aaron was speaking to the entire Israelite community, they turned toward the wilderness, and there in a cloud, the Lord's glory, Yahweh's glory, appeared. Yahweh spoke to Moses, "I have heard the complaints of the Israelites. Tell them, at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will eat bread until you are full. Then you will know that I am Yahweh, your God." So at evening, quail came and covered the camp. In the morning, there was a layer of dew all around the camp. And when the layer of dew evaporated, there were white flakes on the desert surface, as fine as frost on the ground. And when the Israelites saw it, they asked one another, "What is it?" Because they didn't know what it was. Moses told them, "It is the bread it is the bread Yahweh has given you to eat. This is what Yahweh has commanded. Gather as much of it as each person needs to eat. You may take 2 quarts per individual, according to the number of people each of you has in his tent." So the Israelites did this. Some gathered a lot, some a little. And when they measured out by quarts, the person who gathered a lot had no surplus, and the person who gathered a little had no shortage. Each gathered as much as he needed. Moses said to them, "No one is to let any of it remain until morning." But they didn't listen to Moses. Some people left part of it until morning, and it bred worms and stank. Therefore, Moses was angry with them. Verse 21 of Exodus 16. Verse 21, they gathered it every morning. Each gathered as much as he needed to eat. But when the sun grew hot, it melted. On the 6th day, they gathered twice as much food, 4 quarts apiece, and all the leaders of the community came and reported this to Moses. He told them, "This is what Yahweh has said. Tomorrow is a day of complete rest, a holy Sabbath to Yahweh. Bake what you want to bake, and boil what you want to boil, and set aside everything left over to be kept until morning. So they set it aside until morning as Moses commanded, and it didn't stink or have maggots in it. Eat it today, Moses said, because today is a Sabbath to Yahweh. Today you won't find any in the field. For 6 days you will gather it, but on the seventh day, the Sabbath, there will be none. Yet on the seventh day, some of the people went out to gather, but they did not find any. Then Yahweh said to Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my commands and instructions? Understand that Yahweh has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the sixth day, he will give you 2 days' worth of bread. Each of you stay where you are. No one is to leave his place on the seventh day. So the people rested on the seventh day. The house of Israel named the sustenance manna. It resembled coriander seed, was white, and tasted like wafers made with honey. Actually sounds kind of tasty. But Moses said, of course, that's my input. Verse 32, Moses said, this is what Yahweh has commanded. 2 quarts of it are to be preserved throughout your generations, so that they may see the bread I fed you in the wilderness when I brought you out of the land of Egypt. Moses told Aaron, take a container and put 2 quarts of manna in it, then place it before Yahweh to be preserved throughout your generations. As the Lord commanded Moses, Aaron placed it before the testimony, or the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark of the Testimony, to be preserved. The Israelites ate manna for 40 years until they came to an inhabited land. They ate manna until they reached the border of the land of Canaan. They used a measure called an omer, which held 2 quarts. Chapter 17 now. Exodus 17, verse number 1. Sorry, my allergies are kicking in today. Well, we're going to persevere. The entire Israelite community left the wilderness of Sin, moving from one place to the next, according to Yahweh's command. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. So the people complained to Moses, give us water to drink. Why are you complaining to me? Moses replied to them, why are you testing Yahweh? But the people thirsted there for water and grumbled against Moses. They said, why did you ever bring us up from Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst? Then Moses cried out to the Lord, cried out to Yahweh, what should I do with these people? In a little while, they will stone me. Yahweh answered Moses, go on ahead of the people and take some of the elders of Israel with you. Take the staff you struck the Nile with in your hand and go. I'm going to stand there in front of you on the rock at Horeb. When you hit the rock, water will come out of it, and the people will drink. Moses did this in the sight of the elders. He named the place Massa and Meribah, because the Israelites complained, and because they tested Yahweh, saying, is Yahweh among us or not? And Rephidim, at the same place, Amalek came and fought against Israel. Moses said to Joshua, select some men for us and go fight against Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the hilltop with God's staff in my hand. Joshua did as Moses had told him, and he fought against Amalek, while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. While Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. But whenever he put his hand down, Amalek prevailed. When Moses' hands grew heavy, they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. Then Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and one on the other, so that his hands remained steady until the sun went down. So Joshua defeated Amalek and his army with the sword. Yahweh then said to Moses, write this down on a scroll as a reminder and recite it to Joshua. I will completely blot out the memory of Amalek under heaven. And Moses built an altar and named it, Yahweh is my banner, or Yahweh Nissi. He said, indeed, my hand is lifted up toward Yahweh's throne. The Lord will be at war with Amalek from generation to generation. And that concludes Exodus 16 and 17. There's a lot we can cover. I'm not going to go into incredible detail here, but we're going to see again in 16 and 17, the last two of these three different instances in which the people complained against God, and God shows his ability to provide for them. First of all, we see once they leave this garden type of place, Elim, which is described the exact opposite way of the desert. The desert is dry and harsh. Elim, this oasis, it seems, of sorts, is very lush and plentiful. But once they leave there and they go back into the desert, they go back into the wilderness, well, they begin to complain once again. And it's unfortunate because they're only seemingly a month or so past the Exodus, and yet they're still complaining against the Lord. They're grumbling against him, saying that, oh, if only you would have left us in Egypt, then we could be happy. Sure, we might be dead, but at least we wouldn't be at least we wouldn't be hungry here in the wilderness. Why do you continue to hurt us? You brought us into this wilderness to make this whole assembly die of hunger. And where we might think here in this moment that Yahweh's going to come down harshly on them, he actually doesn't. It's very tame response from God here. He just says, all right, I'm going to give them bread from heaven, and this is going to be a test. I'm going to test them to see if they will listen to me and do what I say in carrying out these instructions. I'm going to offer to them. The instructions are pretty simple. Gather for 6 days, and on that 6th day, get a double portion so that you can have that for the Sabbath day, because the Sabbath is introduced here. This concept is mentioned here within this text. Now Moses goes to the people, instructs them what to do, and says, hey, don't complain to me, don't complain to Aaron. You're complaining against God, and you really need to think about that. Think about the reality that you're complaining against the one who has just done all of these incredible signs in your sight. Is he someone you really want to test? Is he someone you really want to go against? So we have all these instructions. Then there's this awesome event where the Lord's glory shines before them, and they get to experience that, a really cool thing. And then I also noted at the end of verse 12 where it says, then you will know that I am Yahweh your God. Remember that type of language was used with Pharaoh. Then you will know that I am Yahweh and there is no one like me. But he learned that through the plague. Here, the people are going to learn the reality of Yahweh through blessing. And that is a blessing of being a part of God's people, being in covenant with him. So they have the bread, they have the manna that's eventually going to come down. Again, the Sabbath is introduced, that tomorrow is a day of complete rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you want to bake, boil what you want to boil, and set it aside. Everything left over to be kept until morning. And not only are they the ones that are resting, but it's God that's resting. God does not provide for them on the 7th day. So they are simply to participate with him in this time of rest. Now, unfortunately, the people don't listen. They still go out and try to gather on the Sabbath. That does incur God's anger. How long will you refuse to keep my commands and instructions? Understand that Yahweh has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, on the 6th day, he will give you 2 days worth of bread. Each of you is to stay where you are. No one is to leave his place on the 7th day. So the people rested on the 7th day. He says, hey, excuse me, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to give you exactly what you need. It's not like I'm going to give you food for 6 days and then not give it to you on the 7th day. I'm going to give you what you need. And the fact that they had to get rid of it after every day just provides the next day another opportunity for God to provide for them. So it's another day to put their trust in God that he will take care of them. So they call this sustenance manna, and they were to take a portion of it and to keep it, so it serves as a sign throughout the generations that God takes care of them. Moses even tells Aaron to take some of this and to preserve it again throughout the generations. And it's interesting that in verse 34, as Yahweh commanded Moses, Aaron placed it before the testimony to be preserved. This is the Ark of the Covenant, but the Ark of the Covenant is not made yet. So how can that fit here within this text? Furthermore, verse 35, the Israelites ate manna for 40 years until they came to an inhabited land. They ate manna until they reached the border of the land of Canaan. and then gives the extra detail that they used a measure called an omer, which held 2 quarts. So again, we're talking about something that's 40 years past that now. What this introduces is a conundrum that some have, because there's a thought by some that Moses wrote every single word of the Pentateuch, that there was nothing that was written apart from him. Number one, I don't think, I could be wrong, but I do not believe that's actually claimed anywhere in the first 5 books of the Old Testament. I don't think that's a biblical claim. I think that's just a claim some people make based upon some evidence that is there. Yes, but it seems to be with these 2 verses, 34 and 35, and 36 as well. It seems to indicate that there might have been others that worked on these texts as well, that there was what might be referred to as like an editing process, to where Moses began the work and others added to it until it became this finished product. Now, to me, to some, to say there's an editing process, there are other people working on these books, cause them trouble, because they're thinking, oh, well, this is just a product of the mind of men then. But I would suggest to you that God is not bound to write any of these books by just one person. If he wants to use the process of editing and adding after the fact of when this thing took place in order to add more detail, because remember, this is being written not as these things are happening, but this is written after these things have already taken place. But you still could not write about something like this unless it had already taken place. And again, these things take place later on, especially after giving this detail about they ate this until they got to the land. That's not a detail Moses could give, because he's not there at that point. He's passed on already. So that just leaves some people with a conundrum. But again, my solution to that is to be okay with an editing process where people are adding to this. Again, I believe fully that the Holy Spirit will still be involved in this, and the Holy Spirit is still guiding this process in every way. But that's just something to think about, because some people would look to this anachronistic detail and try to claim, oh, well, this just shows that Moses didn't write everything, so it's a sham. Well, no, I don't think just because Moses didn't write every single word means that I don't believe that means it's a sham. It just shows that God was working with other people to bring this completed work together as we have it today. So just a detail to think about from this text, and because there are some other places in the Pentateuch where that also shows up as well. Now, finally for today, we have chapter 17, which speaks about another one of the complaining scenes. This is just, it's just this lack of trust is almost absurd, that they continue to complain about the same type of things. This time water comes up once again, and Moses, claps back at the people. Why are you complaining to me? But even more so, why are you testing Yahweh? But the people thirsted, they grumbled, they complained against Moses. Once again, why did you bring us out of Egypt? Just to kill us with thirst? And Moses then turns his attention to Yahweh and says, what should I do? Because they're mad at this point, and they might just stone me. They might just try to kill me. God's patience is on full display once again within this story. And God shows that he has power against all sorts of hostility. He's shown his power against the hostility of Egypt, and now he shows his power against the hostility of the desert. Again, the dry, harsh conditions of the desert. This does not stand as a real problem in the eyes of God. He will provide, and the way he provides is that he's going to send Moses and the elders of Israel to Horeb. He's going to strike the rock, and the water is going to come from that. Remember, there's a couple of different instances where this type of thing takes place. There's a striking scene, there's a speaking scene, and then there's another striking scene where Moses gets in trouble, unfortunately. But here God provides for them in a miraculous way once again. And Moses names this place Massah and Meribah, which means complained and tested, to remind the people. They were asking, is Yahweh among us or not? And the fact that water came from the rock should have proved to them that, yes, of course, Yahweh is with us. He did not just bring us out of Egypt to die in this wilderness, but he has a place that he's trying to get us to. and he is going to achieve that purpose. And then finally, in chapter 17, beginning of verse number 8, we see the first military encounter that Israel faces, and this comes at the hands of Amalek, who comes to fight against Israel. So Moses speaks about Joshua. I think I could be wrong about this. I think this is Joshua's first mentioning within the text. He's just kind of abruptly inserted into the text. So is this other individual named Hur, but tells us that Moses sends Joshua to go and fight. And then Moses, for whatever reason, says, I'm going to go up on the hilltop with God's staff in hand. And Aaron and Hur goes with him. And while they're fighting, Moses lifts up his hand, presumably with the staff in it, or maybe not. With the staff in it. And somehow, as the staff is raised in his hands, Israel is winning the battle. But when his hands fell down, they began to lose the battle. And of course, holding a staff in your hands, I mean, even just holding your hands up without anything in them, you can only do that for so long. They're going to get tired. But holding a large piece of wood in your hand would tire them out even more. So Aaron and Hur begin to support his hands until the victory is achieved. Here's my question. Why? Why does this work? It's not stated as if this was a command from God to do so. Maybe that's just not provided for us. Maybe that is what the case was, but we're not given that. So why? Why is this a thing? I don't know. I really have no idea. Not sure if there's any indication that gives us an exact reason as to why this raising the hands led to victory and falling in the hands would lead to being defeated. Whatever the case might be, maybe it's just a lesson on teamwork, that Moses, Aaron, and Hur had to work together in order to bring a victory. I'm not sure. But following this victory, Yahweh tells Moses to write this down on a scroll as a reminder and recite it to Joshua, that I will completely blot out the memory of Amalek under the earth. And I think that's probably completed best once we get to 1 Samuel 15 with Saul, and then David cleans up the remainder in 1 Samuel chapter 30. But still, they needed to be reminded of this first victory that God gave them in a battle scene. But it's also foreshadowing Sinai. Here Moses writes this down on a scroll. Later on, he's going to write down the 10 commandments and deliver them to the people. So Moses becomes a person who does a lot of writing. Again, we believe that already because the writing of the text that we have before us. Then finally, he builds an altar, and he names it that Yahweh is my banner. And he said, indeed, my hand is lifted up toward the Lord's throne, towards Yahweh's throne. Again, this play on what just took place. And he is confident that Yahweh will be at war with Amalek from generation to generation. Again, these are the Amalekites. There's also an Esther tie-in here within the text. I believe Haman, the Aggites, would be a descendant of the Amalekites as well. I think I read that somewhere and made that connection too. So these are going to be a continued ongoing enemy for Israel throughout the coming generations as they battle against them. So there's a lot going on in chapters 15, at the end of chapter 15, with the first water scene, going through chapter 16 and 17 with the other things that take place here. But it's a process. It's a process of God bringing this people, birthing them through the sea, and then trying to bring them through infancy in these difficult situations. Yet God has a goal in mind. That goal is to get them to Sinai, to enter into them with the established covenant of the law, so that they could be his special people. He can be their great God, and they can continue to grow and to mature into the nation that he desires for them to be. Of course, if you know the story at all, you know there's going to be many, many bumps along the way. And yet we're going to continue to see God's patience with his people, his love for them, his grace toward them. And Moses being right there along with him every step of the way as well. Tomorrow, as we read together from chapter 18, double check to make sure. Yep, tomorrow, chapter 18, we're going to read about Jethro's visit to Moses, going to bring his wife and sons with him as well. We're going to really see some lessons there on leadership. I'm excited to talk about that with you tomorrow. On the last day of February 28th, we're going to read together from Exodus chapter 18. Hope you can join in then. I appreciate you tuning in today. Have a great rest of your Monday, everyone. Take care and God bless, and thanks so much. We'll see you again tomorrow.